the death of the labor market has been greatly exaggerated based on recent data. And I think that all in all, the inflation numbers, they're pretty respectable here.
Month over month, we came in line with expectations. A jump of 0.3%, Maria. Year over year, that came in 2.7%. That is above expectations of 2.6%. We saw a little bit of a change this morning in that expectation. Core came in better than expected, lighter than expected, 0.2%. They were looking for 0.3% on core. That's month to month. And then core year over year coming in a little bit better than expected, 2.9%. The expectation for core, 3% year over year.
That is a real turnaround because you didn't want to vote for him.
I told you the reason. I want to tell you, I'm a believer.
All right, guys. Well, sorry the content has been a bit slow. I am pretty sick, as you might be able to tell by my voice. But forget all of that, because today we have to bring you yet another inflation report that has come in relatively tame, right? This is now the fifth month in a row where inflation has been a result lower than the so-called forecasts and predictions by the expert economists who are supposed to know what they're talking about. And it's worth noting here once again that the so-called tariff-based inflation that Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve are pretending to use as a justification for keeping interest rates exorbitantly high, while virtually every other nation with a major central bank on the planet Earth is doing the exact opposite right now, that once again has come in basically non-existent, right? We're not talking about any levels of major increases of inflation that would justify this type of decision. As a matter of fact, I can think back to what real inflation increases look like, right? The major impacts on consumers in the economy, and it does not look like here, folks, 2.7 or 2.9%. I think it looks much more like the 8 to 9% inflation that I might remember under the prior and previous administration. But with that, all of that in mind, it is worth noting here that this is not how in any way the mainstream media is framing the situation, right? If you've read their headlines today, they're saying, look, inflation went up in the month of June. This is proof that Donald Trump's tariffs are destroying the economy and why Jerome Powell is right. Except when you look at the actual number of inflation and you put it into the greater context of what we're dealing with, I mean, look at that right here. Look at this chart, right? This is the inflation under Joe Biden, obviously. This is the so-called inflation increase right now. And keep in mind, Jerome Powell even went so far, so egregious and shameless in his behavior, to cut interest rates in 2024 when we're looking at inflation still higher than it is right now. Yeah, utterly ridiculous. But this is exactly what happens when you have Trump derangement syndrome and a confirmation bias, right? According to these people, the Trump tariffs are going to destroy the economy, and that didn't happen. So they're now trying to look for any sliver of proof that, like, oh, inflation ticked up this much, even though we've said it's supposed to be up like 20%, because that's how tariffs work. If you do 20% tariff, that must mean a 20% price increase because, haha, I'm like a Facebook economist or something. Not how it works, by the way. Since none of that happened, they are trying now to run with this tiny, minuscule number as the proof that, oh, they were all right about everything, which frankly, folks, they are not. And what's interesting here is we even have so-called expert economists themselves, right? Art Laffer there being an example here of someone who's had a little bit of a back and forth relationship with the conservative circles, you could say. He is a supply side guy, but of course that is also the voodoo economics person back from the 1980s here. And by the way, not really the type of person philosophically I would expect to be on the side of Trump's tariffs, but he came out today on CNBC and even went so far as to state, yeah, the tariff inflation is not happening. And we even have, by the way, the CEO of Home Depot. Now keep in mind, Home Depot, number one, not only did the CEO not support Trump, not really a big fan, now come out and defend him, but also supposedly, right? You talk about his line of work should be an industry that is heavily impacted by Trump tariffs, especially dealing here with China and Canada. Even he is now coming out today and throwing his support behind Trump and what he is doing. We also see signs out of the business world of increased confidence in the economy and Trump's vision here that we're going to tell you the honest truth here today, as well as apparently a new trade deal that has come in with the nation of Indonesia. because these people have nothing besides bitterly seething about it, trying to find the smallest rationale or justification to defend Jerome Powell. But we'll get into all of it here today. First, though, folks, as usual, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe if you are new. Subscribing to the channel is not only the best way to support our videos, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And with that said, so let's talk about this inflation report. We showed you some of the details in the opening clip here. We're talking about a 2.7% inflation report, talking about core inflation out of the month of June. Core inflation excludes the prices of food and energy. We're looking at 2.9%, which is, yes, an increase from prior months, but still, again, when you look in the context of what we're dealing with here, this is the Joe Biden inflation that had nothing to do with tariffs. This is the so-called tariff inflation, right? What did they choose to make a big deal out of? I mean, which inflation, let's guess, which inflation is, the result of bad policy and catastrophic, and which inflation is simply, transitory, right? Obviously, putting this in the greater context of things, you look at Trump versus Biden in their first year of inflation, Trump's first year. So April 2025, 2.3%, May 2025, 2.4%, June 2025, 2.7%. Okay, then reverse that. In Joe Biden's first year, I should say, of his presidency, April 2021, 4.2%, May 2021, 5%, June 2021, 5.4%. I mean, we obviously know that trend. And again, this so-called inflation report, that's like really bad, right? Let's put that in the greater context of things. So now, joining it all together, the numbers from Trump's first year, in 2025, we've had 2.7% inflation. I mean, just put this on the chart, right, of Biden inflation versus Trump inflation, right? Even in 2024, when Biden supposedly had the economy all fixed, still looking here at 2.9% inflation, which is still higher than where Trump's inflation is with tariffs involved here, guys, which are supposed to be destroying the economy. Newsflash, the overall point here is that if this trend continues to shoot up to, 3, 4, 5%, then there might be reason for concern. But thus far, I'm still once again sitting here and saying, in any major significant way, the tariff impact on inflation is not really showing up in a way that is supposed to be all that catastrophic. I mean, here you see once again, right? When Biden left office versus now, still better, right? This is a relatively tame inflation report. Again, this is coming in even lower once again, a 0.2% increase in June. The economists were telling us that by the summertime, right, the tariffs are going to be totally freaking having the biggest impact on the economy. Wait till you see it. All the consumers are going to notice it. Are the consumers really noticing a 0.2% increase in prices, or are the prices remaining relatively the same? I don't know. Great question. But here we have Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent coming in today after the inflation report saying, yes, one thing that Wall Street economists got wrong early on was that tariffs were going to cause a substantial price level rise, which, yes, just has not happened, right? We have not still to this day seen major inflation like they keep telling us as a result of these tariffs, and that's worth noting.
But I wouldn't put too much emphasis on one number. I think it's the trend, and I think one thing that Wall Street, a lot of economists, market in general got wrong early on was that tariffs were going to cause a substantial price level rise, which just hasn't happened.
So in other words, the sky has not come crashing down. And as we'll show you in a second, there are many positive policies actually being created as a result of the tariffs. But nonetheless, keep in mind that Scott Bessent, who is obviously a spokesperson for the Trump administration, is far from the only one uttering these types of sentiments. This is a wide-scale thing that, the tariffs just have not had the economic impact that many are expected or thought were going to happen. And even CNN has recently come out and admitted that as well. Take a listen as well.
Again, since, March and before, there were predictions that the tariffs, and granted, a lot of them have been pulled back, most of them have been pulled back, but all that tariff policy was going to lead perhaps to inflation, would lead to job losses, predictions of doom. That doom just hasn't happened yet.
It hasn't happened. And, John, I've been doing a lot of reporting on this topic. And what I'm hearing is that for the last few years, really since COVID, but even before, companies have realized that their supply chains can be interrupted for lots of reasons, for a virus, for a geopolitical event, for a war, for a climate event. And so they've been using technology to really streamline things. They've been getting their systems in place, and there's just a lot more efficiency in the system now. In some ways, I think this is a triumph of business and how business has been optimizing. Now, that said, when we think about who's going to do well in this period, it's going to be big businesses. I am hearing that there's more pressure on small and mid-sized businesses that will be far less able to cope with whatever tariff inflationary impact we do see. That concerns me because small and mid-sized businesses are what fuels a lot of communities around the country. If you see them going under because they can't take even a little bit of tariff pressure, that could have a jobs impact. So again, optimistic right now, but it's, there are some issues on the horizon still.
All right, but a good jobs report, one more good jobs report. We've really seen a long run. We're talking years long run here of this at this point. Rana Faruha, great to see you. Thank you very much. Sarah?
Businesses are actually really good at optimizing their production and finding a way around these things. That sounds familiar. That sounds actually exactly like what I said back in April when this first came out. Now, that said, it could be a valid point about the small business concerns potentially, and I understand the logic, but it's also worth noting here that when you look at the current jobs reports, that is still yet to happen, right? And so you can talk hypothetically all you want till the cows come home about, the inflation's going to massively spike. It has not. The jobs, small businesses are going to go under. Okay, but if those things haven't happened and they just keep on not happening, then at a certain point, it really does become fear-mongering. Now, with that in mind, we also have a clip here of Art Laffer, who actually came out here and explained for you in detail as to why you still see virtually no impact on U.S. inflation from these tariffs. And on the flip side, as is pointed out here and is also true, we talked about this in our stream on Saturday, the reverse is happening in regards to the U.S. national debt, right? In the month of June, for the first time in a very long time, I have to presume here, the U.S. Treasury raked in, instead of a deficit like we usually run up, right? National debt just goes up and up, actually generated a surplus here of $100 billion. The reason why is not because of obviously increasing taxes on Americans, which has not happened, but the increase of, guess what, tariffs, as Trump actually promised in his campaign and in his inauguration, right? The External Revenue Service program here seems to be working because national debt actually went down in the month of June because of this situation, which of course also begs the question, where are the libertarians? Where is Elon Musk, Thomas Massie, all these people praising the Trump tariff policy? Will they be doing so, right? Because we're actually solving our deficit crisis with these policies, which, by the way, it's worth noting as well, the Congressional Budget Office notably did not factor in when they made their projections about how the big, beautiful bill would be raising that budget deficit, and I noted that at the time. But anyways, here, take a listen to the one and only Art Laffer explain for you in detail what's going on and why you're not actually seeing the impact of inflation and tariffs specifically in any, again, notable way.
What effect are tariffs having on prices?
Almost zero, Stuart. I mean, almost zero, literally. The reason people export is to be able to earn the wherewithal to import. So if you import and those prices go up, your exports go down and those prices fall. This is called Lerner's symmetry theorem, and it should have virtually no effect whatsoever on overall inflation, period. That's theoretically. If you look at the numbers with the Smoot-Hawley tariff or with Nixon's tariffs, prices fell rather than rose. So I don't know what all this brouhaha is about inflation.
Well, listen to this. This is a headline from the New York Times, just coming across at us after the CPR report. It says, U.S. inflation accelerated in June as Trump's tariffs pushed up prices. The direct opposite of what you say.
What can I tell you?
New York Times.
They're wrong and I'm right. I'm sorry. I've got my PhD better than they do. I mean, this is my life's work. I've worked on international trade. And 1 month, one way or the other, these things bobble and wiggle and have volatility. But believe me, it is not an inflation issue that comes with tariffs. It is an output production standard of living issue. That's real. But this is not.
Now, that said, perhaps another great source to ask in this regard may actually be business leaders themselves, right? You're running your business, especially those who deal with, tariff-based issues. How are you feeling How are things going? And as you can see here, just today, in the wake of this inflation report that supposedly is supposed to be causing all of this, mutiny within economic circles, which still yet has not happened, the founder of Home Depot, who said he did not want to vote for President Trump, is shocking the business world today. This is also someone who came out and opposed the Trump tariff policy, now has come out and stated, and I quote, "I am sold on Trump. I think he's got a good shot at going down in history as one of our best presidents ever." The host here notes that's a turnaround, and he says, "I'll tell you the reason. Now I'm a believer. What I'm seeing happening is absolutely nothing short of a great thing, and there's a beat. People are walking around with more bounce. I think this guy is turning out to be a great president." Very interesting, right? Again, considering Home Depot, right? You're talking about a business who, the guys out front, I never knew if they worked for Home Depot or not, but obviously a lot of illegal aliens being deported on one hand. But on the other hand, right, you talk about things like building materials, stuff that comes in from potentially China, Canada, countries like that. All of that in mind, he is coming out now and stating, as someone who's not the biggest Trump supporter, that he's now seeing optimism in the economy. And newsflash, he's not the only one. Take a listen.
Look, let me tell you right now, I am sold on Trump. In fact, I'll say this. I think he's got a good shot at going down in history as one of our best presidents ever.
That is a real turnaround because you didn't want to vote for him.
I tell you the reason. I want to tell you, I'm a believer. What I'm seeing happening is absolutely nothing short of a great thing. And there's a beat. People are walking with more bounce in there. It's all around.
I gave you quite a bit of grief.
Huh?
I gave you grief.
You give me grief?
I gave you grief when it was a binary choice. You're still complaining about Trump and it was a binary choice. It's like, are you kidding me?
Knowledge implies one thing. When you made a mistake, admit it.
Okay.
I think this guy is turning out to be a president.
Right.
One of the pilots on that miraculous trip to Iran that we wiped out, whatever the hell we wiped out,
right.
He said, "You're the only guy that in the presidency that would have done what you did." One of the pilots said that.
Yeah.
And you know what? He's probably right.
And here's the thing. He's not the only one, right? Because I'll reiterate here. If you had a situation truly, you want to believe me or you want to believe the mainstream media the way we're framing this, if the sky were falling down in the context of the economy, if we're on the verge of recession and all this bad stuff, as they say, inflation through the roof, stagflation, right? That evil, bad word. If all of that stuff were supposedly happening, you would not probably, at least unless they're catastrophically wrong, but you likely would not be seeing that type of optimism here out of the business world. And newsflash, he is not the only one saying this. You see, for instance, pollster Frank Luntz here noting that inflation still remains far below the highs seen 3 years ago. Yes, when prices reached as high as 9%, as I noted earlier. But even here today, we also got further economic news that, on one hand, right, tariffs not having a major impact on prices, but on the other hand, yielding very positive results for our country. Not just out of the U.S. Treasury, but the real business world itself. Just today, Apple came out and said they are backing Trump's rare earth minerals push, investing $500 million in a U.S. mine to do so. White House officials call the deal a major win for the Trump administration. This is a big deal not only because, Trump wants to create jobs domestically, although he does, right, more investment now back in our country, but this, despite the objections of the so-called anti-tariff people and all this, is, why could you possibly want to divest from China? Like, don't you know, your prices are going to go up $1 to $2. Can you believe that? No, this is a major national security concern for the United States, right? We have rare earth minerals that, largely speaking, you look at microchips and all that, are necessary to power most of the electronics now of the modern world. And you look at the current U.S. supply chains, America's almost entirely reliant on nations like China and Taiwan to a degree for the microchips as well for these types of things. That is catastrophic, right? So now what Trump's been trying to do is push, hey, future national security, because guess what? In 10 years, if a war between China and Taiwan breaks out, this is not a position you want to be in. Big there, both on the jobs front, both on the kind of I was right front, but also national security, right? Big victory there. And this further comes at the same time that, again, just today, right? There's another day where the economic victories come out and out and out. Donald J. Trump is announcing that he has now finalized a trade deal with the nation of Indonesia. in this deal. As you can see, here's his statement. This morning, I finalized an important deal with the Republic of Indonesia after speaking with their highly respected president, Prabowo Subianto. I'm guessing I'm saying that wrong, but this landmark deal opens up Indonesia's entire market to the United States for the first time in history. This is another case. You just saw this happen with Vietnam. And as I said, once you make one trade deal, the dominoes become easier to knock down here. Where a big thing I've often noted is, why is it that a lot of these nations, especially in Asia, not the only one, but, prime example, Japan, China, etc., get to basically become rich off of U.S. markets, right? They can come in, they can manufacture their products, sell them basically duty-free in the United States, take a lot of those profits and revenues back to their home countries. But when American companies want to break in and do the same, it's not reciprocal, right? Oh, high tariff barriers, non-tariff barriers even, right? So basically, other nations are becoming rich off of us, but we are not even allowed to try to compete fairly to become rich off of them. That is not free trade. That is not reciprocal. That is imbalanced. That is crooked. That is uneven. So this is another case where now, after Vietnam agreed to do it, Trump has gotten Indonesia to open their market to the U.S. so that way American companies, hey, if you're going to trade with us, we should also be able to trade with you. It should not be a one-party thing where, we just take all your imports and, nothing in return. So he says here, as part of the agreement, Indonesia has committed to purchasing $15 billion in U.S. energy, $4.5 billion in American agricultural products, 50 Boeing jets, many of them 777s, for the first time ever. Our ranchers, farmers, and fishermen will have complete and total access to the Indonesian market of over 280 million people. In addition, Indonesia will pay the U.S. a 19% tariff on all good they export to the U.S., while U.S. exports to Indonesia will be tariff and non-tariff barrier free. There you go. So what a deal he's negotiated here, right? We get tariff revenue. We also get to go to those markets, right, to compete tariff free. I mean, that's how you negotiate for sure. If there is any transshipment from a higher tariff country, then that tariff will be added on to the tariff that Indonesia is paying. Thank you to the people of Indonesia for your friendship and commitment to balancing our trade deficit. We will keep delivering for the American people and the people of Indonesia. So there you go. Yet again, we just keep racking this up. Donald Trump also came out today and noted that the Fed should cut rates by 3 points. We have, yes, as I noted, very low inflation. Look at the context if you don't believe me. $1 trillion a year would be saved. Caroline Leavitt is noting, every month since President Trump took office, core inflation, which is just the best measure of inflation, has beat or matched expectations. So how can the Federal Reserve, another valid question here, be going off their future forecasts of potential inflation to keep interest rates high when their forecasts literally every single month are wrong, right? It doesn't even make any freaking sense. But anyways, the data proves that President Trump is stabilizing inflation, true, and the panicans here continue to be wrong about tariffs raising prices, also true. Of course, it is simply the case that Jerome Powell is a anti-Trump saboteur, to say the least, and he is, I think I would argue, probably purposely trying to keep our economy slow and stagnant to any degree possible. But whatever point he's finally forced to do it, I think that'll be a great thing for this country finally, because you could argue that is something kind of holding back the economy right now, especially in the housing market. For a long time, it has been a seller's market, not a buyer's market. Right now, it's neither a market because everyone's just standing around waiting. And I'm sure that's not the only case. You talk about things like business investment and all that stuff, right? There's an extent to which when the interest rates, people are expecting it to come down, but every month they just don't really make a move. People get to a standstill, right? That slows economic growth. Just make a move finally. But anyways, with that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.